Welcome to the Balance and Brilliance podcast, a space where different perspectives and ideas converge to create powerful change. I'm your host, Terrence Hanna, serial entrepreneur and performance coach, and I'm joined by host Zoe McMahon, Fortune 100 executive and lifelong change maker. In this show, we share our complementary experiences and perspectives on topics that both propel and limit us all. We hope that by tuning in, you're able to launch yourself further with balance and brilliance. Like and subscribe to support the channel, and be sure to drop a comment below to lend your balance and brilliance to the world. Let's dive in. All right. Well, welcome everybody to Balance and Brilliance. I'm your host, Terrence, and as always, we have the amazing Zoe McMahon with us today, and we also have a very special guest. We have Hank Marshall, head of global engineering at Pfizer, as well as now currently operating as the head of U.S. operations for Clearflow Group. Today, we have a very interesting topic. We're going to be continuing on in our series on career. And today we want to talk a little bit about climbing the corporate ladder, or is it a corporate ladder? Where the idea for this episode came from, I just want to give a little bit of background on myself here. As a lot of you guys know, the vast majority of my experience is as an entrepreneur. So when I originally talked to Zoe about doing this episode, it sparked just a phenomenal discussion of, what is the corporate ladder? Is there a corporate ladder? What does this mean to people who have actually ascended in the corporate world? And today we have two phenomenal executives with us from major business within the United States. And I am just this sort of like noob entrepreneur who's like, I've got some entrepreneur experience, but I don't have like a lot of this corporate ladder climbing experience. So I'm hoping that they can knock some of the rungs off for me today, and I can learn a ton from both of them. So Hank, over to you. Give us a little bit of your background. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Good. Hey, thank you for this. This is absolutely delightful, and I'd actually like to hear Zoe's perspective because you give me the microphone, and an hour later you'll get a word in. So I suspect that we have some synergy on the topic, but I'd certainly welcome her perspective, and then I can come in behind and just say what she said, or I can elaborate. But I'd be thrilled. I'm really dying to hear what Zoe has to say.
Oh, sure. I mean, so I've only ever worked in corporate America since graduating, so I guess I'm a little bit institutionalized at this point. But when people talk about the ladder, um, and I like the way you put it, Terry, afterwards, which was like ascending nevertheless, because I do think there is an ascending. I mean, clearly there are levels in organizations, unless you have a particularly flat structure, there are generally levels to ascend. And as you get further up, it gets harder to, assume roles in those because there's just less of them, right? So there is this sense of climbing that is in there. But I tend to see the ascension as more like a mountain than a ladder. And typically when you're mountain climbing, you're never going like vertical up, right? You're kind of going around the back, zigzagging up. And sometimes you might need to go down a bit before you go up a bit. And so I found that the most successful people that I've seen thrive in corporate is there hasn't been this like straight line logical career path. It's gone like, oh, I'm now this, I'm now that, I'm now this, I'm now that. And that's why I don't think it's a ladder. I think it's more of like a circling around a base of a mountain, and choosing the right path to get up to the destination where you want to get to. And not everybody wants to ascend, right? So but that's my imagery, Hank. What do you think of my mountain climbing?
Yeah, I should have gone first because you like stole my idea, but I'm going to give you a different spin on it. I think my first comment would be it's not linear. Okay, so the notion that there is this straight path to get there, and that every increment there's this symmetry to it. It's as asymmetrical as you can possibly imagine. And then I would tell people, understand the destination, is it the summit? Fully understand what the summit is. And there are people who get to the summit, and you can do the analogy of people who climb and then get to the summit and die. It's because they did not understand what arriving at the summit entailed. Okay. You need to know that. But I remember telling Terry the other day, this was going to be my analogy, and it's very similar to yours. I likened it a little differently. I said it's like going to the rock climbing wall. You've got, various positions, and how somebody elects to get to the top, very much like you, Zoe. It can be somebody who wants to take 3.5 seconds and go straight up. Others will, along the way, look for an easier path. They will stop and dwell and assess. They will take the time to, where am I? Take a breath, enjoy the moment, and maybe rethink, I was going to go left, but I'm going to go right. It's crowded over there. I think I'm going to go to the uncrowded area. Well, why is it uncrowded? Well, it's a little more difficult. Are you prepared to do that? And then every one of those ledges and perches has a different, kind of like you going around there. How do you pick your way through that? And then you'll find people that elect to stop part of the way up and call it a day on a rock climb. That's as far as I want to go. So I would liken it to that. I mean, and it is challenging. Sometimes you have a burst and you think, boy, that was easy. And you can be, I think, wrongly maybe given the impression that, gee, it's just a matter of a year or two and I'm going to be the man. But I would say too many people, I think, fail to enjoy the journey. If you're
I want to
solely,
pick up on
go ahead.
I want to pick up on something you said there, which I definitely agree with, and I think it's really, really important, which you said about knowing what the destination entails. And it reminds me of a saying of something like you rise to the level of your own incompetence. And I think sometimes people's perception of what a role is at a higher level in an organization is not at all what it's like. And I would even liken that to, at a much lower level in the organization, I've witnessed a lot of people who want to grow. What they really mean is they want to earn more money. And in order to do that, they think the next logical step is for them to be a manager. But they're looking at it from the perspective of growing upwards in a sense and earning more responsibility and more money, but they're not really thinking about management being a distinctly different thing than whatever they were doing before. And so I really think your point about knowing the destination and what those kind of jobs actually entail is so important, and where people can make assumptions and then fail.
You're spot on.
I want to build in on this as the I'll say the least experienced in actual execution of this, because something that I work with a lot of clients on, as Zoe had mentioned, a lot of people come, they want to make more money, they want to advance in their career, and there's things that we work on by way of stepping stones, knowing your strengths, gaining the education or the experience that you need to pursue that goal, utilizing the network around you. I mean, there's these things that you can do that will just drastically improve your chances. But something that I'm really enjoying about this discussion and hearing you guys talk about the real world application of those skills to get to where you want to go is I think that when I think about climbing a ladder, my brain immediately associates that with work. When I associate it with mountain climbing, or in Hank's example, rock climbing at the rock wall, like those are more dynamic. They're more fun. There's more engagement. There's more fulfillment, even from like the analogous sense. But I think that in the real application of that, where you're zigzagging all over and you're trying new things and you're meeting new people and learning new skills and new different roles, I think that sounds to me like a much more fulfilling experience on the way to the top, as opposed to the notion of just the climbing of the ladder.
Mm.
I mean, if I
Yeah,
could
and
build, go ahead, Zoe, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
If
I'm here every time. You're
That's
special
okay. No,
today.
if I could build on both the analogy that Zoe and I gave, I'm a firm believer that, whether you climb the mountain, as Zoe said, or you're rock climbing, you are doing it with a group of people. This isn't you operating in a vacuum and you being entirely independent of a much bigger experience that's going on around you. So, as you're rock climbing, in many instances, you're going to find yourself helping somebody else up, and moving somebody ahead of you to make sure that they get it's not a race. So, I would say part of the corporate ladder is also understanding to make sure that it's not single-minded about you. There's times that I can specifically remember that aiding somebody else that a year later wound up being my boss, but didn't, was very thankful for the fact that they got there because of me. And because of that, I wound up getting an opportunity about a year later because of that person. So there is a marvelous cascading of events, opportunity that come from, I think if you along the way, I indicated it's a journey, it is, and enjoy it along the way, but also as that climbing, help others, because others are going to be terrified with that climb. Others are going to be disenchanted with it. They're going to be suffocated by it. And you can pretend like that's not happening. And a lot of those will be reporting to you. And your role, all of a sudden, you realize is I've got to get all these other people up. They won't leave the parking lot to get onto the hiking climb. Okay, they're there. So I could talk for hours about that, but my theme here or my thought was really remember it's a climbing exercise that involves more than yourself.
Mm.
Something that really stands out to me there, and Zoe, I'd love to get your take on this after, because you are both incredible leaders in corporate America. What I'm hearing Hank talk about there is like the definition of leadership. Something I was talking about the other day was when you elevate yourself, you elevate your team, and those team members elevate the people that are around them, and so on. And something I just found so inspiring about what you're talking about, Hank, is you know being that person who has the strength to lift other people up creates more opportunities for you and establishes you as somebody who's got drive, who's got knowledge, and who is inspiring and is willing to coach other people to lift them up to a new level. So you know, Zoe, I'm going to pass it to you to dissect that a little bit.
I'm loving our analogies again. We had a episode with a boat. Now today we got this climbing analogy going on. So it's a lot of fun. But um, I think the going back to this example of lots of people climbing together and lifting people up, I do agree with you that it is fundamental to leadership. And there's a slightly different framing that I would use in the same circumstances, which is letting people fly, right?
Yep.
As opposed to lifting them up, letting them go in a way as well, that is also part of this. Because you, in an organization with one leader, not everybody in that organization is going to get that job, right? The job that you're in right now, not everyone's going to get it, and yet they're all wanting something, some growth and some development. And so sometimes it is about lifting people up, but sometimes it's about sort of letting them fly and giving them the breathing room to go to the left place on the mountain that
Yeah.
Hank talked about, that's a little less crowded, and and wish them well over there in that complicated space. Yes, I 100% agree with what Hank said, that you never know when that person might show up in your chain, right? And so
Yeah.
being good to people on the way, it's like you just never know what you might need a person for in an organization. Let's say it could be your boss in the future. Yeah, I love that.
Can I,
When I
can I,
think about, go ahead.
I just want to throw in an example because that's something that actually happened to me. So when I think I was like 15 and I was bagging groceries at the grocery
Yeah.
store. And the store manager, like the head guy for the whole store, I mean, he was larger than life to me at that age. You know what I mean? He was like my boss's 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 boss within the store. And he was always wonderful to me. He always treated me with respect. And he really stood out as somebody who I looked up to, um, who I in my own way aspired to climb the ladder to that level
Yeah.
one day, essentially, because at 15, that's what it was for me. And anyways, many years later, um he showed up on a job site, and I was the foreman on that job site, and it was his very first day. He decided to make a big career change, and it was his first
Good.
day as an apprentice. And I remember he walked in, and exactly what you guys said. Like, he did not need to care who I was at all when I was a kid. And the fact that he did and treated me with respect and gave me opportunity, you know, that is something that's very difficult to forget. And it's
Yeah.
very difficult to want to reciprocate that.
Yeah. No.
Yeah,
Awesome
I love
story.
that. When I think about development, there's actually something you just said I wanted to pick up on, that whole treating people with respect thing. I remember listening to Colin Powell give a presentation once, and this is one of his hallmarks as well. Like, as a great military and government leader, he just levels everybody, like he will be the same to the janitor as he is to the president, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
he makes a point of talking about this. And I think fundamentally every human being has dignity, right, and deserves treating nicely. And that's what we should do anyway, right? But certainly in a work context, that relationship might change, and you just never know, right?
Mhm.
So but I think there's something about, if we're talking about this ascension and some of the qualities that you might need to, other than showing people respect, pulling them up, lifting them up, letting them go, some of those relationship dynamics. What are some of the other features of ascending whatever metaphor you want to ascend? There's a book that we've been reading at work for the last couple of years, at different times, and called Impact Players, by Liz Wiseman. And she talks about people who are going to be the ones who do rise, right? The ones that are going to have the impact. Because, of course, not everybody is going to or wants to, but of the people who are rising, who are they? What are those characteristics? And there was five key parameters that I'll list here, but pick up on whichever one you fancy. But the first is that those people see challenges as opportunities. And Terry, this is like your bag completely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, like, number one, be like Terry and see every challenge as an
Yeah.
opportunity. Second, thinking beyond your role, right? Like, you're in this role, but something needs doing over here. And when you kind of lean in over here as to what needs doing, not what you're in a box doing, is really
Yeah.
important. Leading on demand, not by command. So, again, showing up, leading where you need to lead, not because you've been told to lead that. um Having persistence or agency in your career, like, not giving up, keep going, keep trying, try different angles. And then the final one, and we've talked about this, Terry, in our change series, is actively seeking feedback and learning on the way, right? So I don't know, pick up on any of those you want, but those are the characteristics of people who typically are having a higher impact in the organization, and therefore more likely to ascend, I think.
What do you think about that, Hank? Like, if you were let's use me as an example. Let's say I was coming into a new organization and I was looking up to you as a mentor and somebody who I trusted, which you are those things, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Likewise.
What would you say, like, I think you're an excellent leader and, you've got some work to do. Kind of within the framework that Zoe was talking about, or for
Yeah.
anybody, what would you recommend would be areas to focus on? How would you phrase that?
So, I mean, I'm an engineer, so I think Zoe's probably been around engineers, and
I'm also an engineer, by the way.
you're an engineer. So, I mean,
I gotta get out of here.
we're that's right. I'm at it. Okay, it's over. We're at times characterized as being people that, are never destined to be leaders because we can be engineers, and I won't go into using colorful language to describe how engineers sometimes are defined. Um, but I remember telling you, Terry, that the most influential engineer in my life, so not a business person, but an engineer who thought out of the box, was the craziest individual I've ever met in my life. Was a Greek guy, and at the time I worked for Tetley Tea out of England, and I ran their engineering group, and I managed the sale to Tata at one point. But the mantra that he had and lived and drove us daily on was evolution through revolution. And his belief was, I think it spawned, I think it's topic number 4, was the persistence and the urgency of, we have to be better, we have to do better, we have to make the best product, we have to make it better than everybody else. And without being prescriptive about that, everything we do is suspect to doing it differently. There is no sacred cow in the room. I mean, otherwise people will say, leave all that alone. That's fine. That's bait. That's good. I want you to focus on this little thing and make it better. Well, the problem is it's tied to everything else. I can't go at that without it being in the fabric of what we're working on. And so that's where it got instilled in me. And I would push that down to everybody around me, which was, we are, and that's what I think led to, and I'll go into answering, I think Zoe early on said, how this Captain Epic thing come about. And it got ingrained into me early on as an engineer. If you're going to be doing something, start with epic. The outcome, the impact has to be epic. If you're not going to start there and it's just going to be some silly incremental improvement, why bother? So the epic came naturally, and that's where we started. Whether you're modifying a product, you're thin gauging something, you're increasing output 1,000 times, you're improving quality, whatever it was, it meant to be epic. So that's in my DNA, and I can't turn that off. I mean, it kind of like you, if it's the opportunities are, don't think of as challenges, they are opportunities. Same thing with me. But for me, it's been that incessant go big or go home. It's that shoot for the moon all the time. And when I got into government, which was a 10-year period of my time, and I did that at invitation of a mayor who said, you're crazy enough to come in and fix government. I don't know how or why, but I need you on my staff and just go make stuff happen. I met an individual who very early on noticed that everything I was doing with my team and group was, I'm going to bring it to government too. We're either doing crazy things and epic things. I'm not into chasing parked cars, which is what government seems to be at this, at that point. Like the guy said, who is this guy? What's with everything that's coming out of his mouth is epic. I can't stand this guy. Who invited Captain Epic? And it was derogatory. It was aimed at demeaning me, trying to get me to change me. And it just like throwing gasoline on me. That was it. I drove the guy nuts for 10 years. But I got, believe it or not, along the way, government, which doesn't tend to revere anybody, said, you are the biggest breath of fresh air we've ever seen. You're incessant. And it's spilling over into those areas. How do you then, as I think you indicated, Zoe, how do you look at other ancillary things and do that along the way? So I'm going to show you the one and only picture of Captain Epic ever taken.
Okay.
But I'm going to tell you the back. I'm going to tell you the backdrop to this one. I got tipped off that there was a private retirement party in the agency that he worked in. I got tipped off the day before, and they said it's closed door, but we're going to leave one of the side doors open for you because we'd love for you to come bid adieu to this gentleman. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to be there for that. So as you can imagine, there's about 500 people in the room. And about midway through this fun-loving love fest roasting of this loved guy among his peers and people that work for him, I showed up. I'm not sure you can see this, but there's Captain Epic.
Oh man.
Okay, and that's a homemade outfit that I made at home. And I stormed into the room and did the Tom Cruise. I took my shoes off and I slid into the room. And for 10 minutes, I gave him a Captain Epic lecture. But that all of a sudden it blew up, as you can imagine, with 500 people seeing somebody in a disguise. But
You're totally fulfilling my point here, Hank, which is, the summary of all of those things of the real impact players is that it's not, and this is no disrespect, it's not only talent. It's not talent that makes a difference, it's mindset.
Yep.
And, if you have that right mindset of success and leaning in and challenging things, like you are going to rise, much more freely. People are going to respect that. They're going to want to play with you. They're going to want to work with you, apart from that guy who was a bit sus, but
Yeah.
hey, you can't win all of them. But I
There's
think that is so important, having that energy. And I don't know where it comes from, but I think you have to care about your job to
You
bring
do.
it.
And then, I mean, maybe you guys do this where you're at, Zoe, but for about a 5-year span, we tried something at Pfizer, and I was lucky enough to be one of the participants. And it was fun to do, but you also learned and you were able to gauge, and I'll tell you what it is, but they created two positions, and they were called ministers of joy.
Mhm.
And what basically we were seconded from the role that we were in and placed in this role to effectively roam the halls of the headquarters. And in whatever way we thought appropriate, which started off out of control and then got into control. But how did you impart joy into the lives of people who were spending 8, 10, 12 hours a day in a building away from home, and many times in a very trying, demanding job? And what you found is joy is in the eye of the beholder at times. It's not going in with balloons and saying happy, happy, joy, joy. And the person's like, well, that didn't move the needle. So you developed an incredibly acute sense of trying to understand people. To get a laugh out of this person requires a different skill than getting a laugh out of that person. And it's not always about laugh, it's a smile. It's a stare, it's a wink, it's in whatever way it gets manifested, right? So for me, that period of time, and it was early on in my career, so I learned that people outwardly, and in your role, you know this, people tend to hide and disguise an awful lot. At work, you don't know what happens outside of work. You do not know what's happening within the construct of someone's life directly in the next circle out. So joy took on a very different description for me for a year later. It started off, I think, as I told Terry, running into a conference room with a soaker gun and soaking everybody and finding out who laughed. It
Would you
certainly
laugh,
changed.
Zoe?
Yeah,
I
it was
might,
fun.
I might have laughed at something else more.
But
Hank,
I
it
mean,
was
so it became early on. It was wrongly, and I think maybe it was a journey for me as well to get me to understand that. For early on, it was, can I get laughs? Can I make it about me making you laugh? Towards the end, it was very, very different. It became, 29,000 people in 18 different buildings over 300 acres in roles from R&D to sales to everything else. How did you find a way to effectively bring joy? And I could tell you, 4 hours from now, I could complete the story, but the growth for me came from joy is a very personalized deliverable.
Mm.
And that's what I think the respect that I got later on was I understood that. It wasn't just give everybody a smiley button and I moved on. So anyway, end of that one.
There's
Well, that,
I want to build on that for a second because or get I'm going to dig, I should say, there for a second because I think you made a really important distinction. I think there's a huge opportunity here. So when you were talking about the concept of like instilling joy in others, you would you were talking about, you're trying to get laughs and you're trying to do this, but then you came to this understanding of how personal joy was. And when you're talking about being in the position that you're in and there's 24,000 people
Yeah.
that you're trying to do this with, but joy is such a personal experience.
Yeah.
What what was the recipe or the repeatable process for finding out what that person's joy was as opposed to putting your own thing in that place?
Zoe, do you want to add anything? I hate to be the person that's kind of stealing the mic here, but I can certainly elaborate on that if you want, Terry.
no, let's elaborate on it. And I'm really
Okay.
curious if you can add to it, which is I think this is when we think about our career ascension and
Yep.
our career development conversation, this finding joy topic, I think it's helping two people. I think it's helping you as a leader to be the kind of leader that gets the next gig. So I think
Yep.
that's one benefit. I think it's also helping the people who you're working with
Yep.
to feel engaged that would make them further lean in, find those projects that they want to do. So it's kind of like a contagion. So
Yep.
I'm curious if you would build on that too while you're at it.
Absolutely. So I think maybe I'm going to have benefited from a certain era and time where, everybody was at work. Everybody had
Mm.
a desk. Everybody had a cubicle. So what people tended to do within those desks and cubicles is it became an extension of them, the desk, the walls, everything in that cubicle, people essentially made it comforting. There was something in that. So I would go by and you'd see pictures of grandkids. And it immediately became obvious that grandkids were the joy. So you could play up on that. You go to other ones and you'd see pictures of somebody who liked a vacation somewhere. There were 10 different destinations. So if you became astute, situational awareness, or whatever you want to call it, you were able to absorb, think, process what you were seeing. It wasn't very challenging. I didn't see it to begin with. Okay. For me, it was about, ha, ha, ha. Let me unscrew the light bulbs in your desk. So when you came there tomorrow and you were like, what the hell? So it was part practical joker, the silly stuff that to get a laugh. And that was wrong. Okay. So I did learn. So it was not about the laugh. It wasn't about me. But when you understand, when you could get at that particular person and understand visibly, at least on the surface, what I thought was bringing them joy. Somebody had like 50 plants in their cube. Obvious to me that plants brought you joy. There was something about them. Tell me about that. I'm curious.
Mhm.
How did that start? So I think that was it. It was being observant, and using that as the way in. And
Well,
usually you could get them to express what brought them joy by doing that. And then you could take that to another level. You could do something for them. You could drop something on their desk, and that's how it worked.
well, and this reminds me, we were talking before we started here about the importance of listening. And what you're saying there reminds me very much of that leadership trait of, having bigger ears than a mouth kind of thing. So, would you agree? Is that an example
Oh,
of listening? Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
You know what I
And
take
that, and
away? Oh,
go
sorry,
ahead,
go
Terry.
ahead, Hank. Go ahead.
No, no, go ahead, Terry. No, no, go ahead.
Something that I'm really hearing. So when I was doing my radio show and we talked to so many, like well over 100,000 people, and I got some incredible advice from somebody one day because we were in a discussion, and I said, I care so much about my audience and the people that come up on stage and lend the time and everything like that, and I always want to make sure that the conversation is engaging as possible, right? I'm just trying to tie my own experience back to what you're saying. Something that I really always tried to do is remember one thing about every person that I talked to. I didn't need to remember everything, but there's this one guy that I talked to. His name was Rectangle, and I knew he loved skateboards. So, and I still remember this, right?
Yeah.
So every time I would talk to him, I had a way that I could talk to him, and this led to just incredible discussions. And you could spread this out across everything, but what I'm really hearing you say right now, that's that's super profound to me, and I think this is central, is like be interested versus interesting. And that's something that you said to me. I don't want to like steal your words here because you said that to me a few days ago when we spoke. And it was really profound and it's really been ringing in my head. And getting to hear you talk now and getting to hear Zoe talk, it just seems like, this, whether you're dealing with 24,000 staff or 100,000 listeners or 20 million podcast viewers, knock on wood, that's something that
Yep.
is central to all of that, and I'd love for you to share more of your thoughts on that.
Go ahead, Zoe. I know you've heard the same words, so I'm happy to elaborate
Oh
after you.
no, you go. I think you said it to Terry. You go for it.
No, I mean, I think I guess it's maybe the more modern interpretation of a rather long standing, be seen, not heard. There's other ways that people have characterized that if you're in a room, you're in an organization, I don't care if you're starting it, you've been there for 30 years, any expression of interest is going to get noticed. People are going to pick up on that. Interesting at times can be noise. It can be distracting. It can be perceived as, being disconnected, not aligned. So I think you got to be careful. Now, at times, being interesting can also be advantageous if somebody is looking for that just unknown. Where am I going to pick up on that? But being interested in a very, very genuine way. How do you get involved in things? Be somebody that steps up to take on the impossible. Who wants to try that? I'm in.
Dude, it's funny. As soon
Really?
as you said that, I
I
was
have
like,
no
holy
idea what the hell I'm doing, but I'm in. Okay. But that exuberance of sign me up, chief. Where are we going to go? And at Pfizer, the chairman or the president at the time was a guy by the name of Hank McInerney. So we had this goofy name in common. And I'll forget, we were in a meeting and my boss was being queried, actually grilled on something. And he passed the buck to me. The question was, I think to my boss was, do you think this is going to work? And we dealt with, billion-dollar medications and billion-dollar product lines. And the question was something on, do you think this is going to work? Are we going to be able to get there this way? And it was, well, what do you think, Hank? It was one of those handoffs. I mean, clearly, let's put Hank out on the edge of the plank. The shark's in the water, and we're going to feed Hank to the sharks. Okay. And I looked right at him and I said, I don't know. But you know what? This time tomorrow, I will have an answer for you. But right now, I don't know. And my boss kicked me under the table like, you're an idiot. You're not going to be here next week. And at any rate, I can tell you that time, even in the eyes of the president of the company, we did meet in the old proverbial lunch line, that everybody used to go down in the cafeteria. I remember him kind of waving at me and pulling me over and saying, I thank you for being honest and in the moment. You didn't make something up. You didn't try and fake your way through it. It was the honest answer. And I said, well, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know. I will find
Yeah.
out though. If you expect me to be the know everything, be everything, that's a big mistake. I'm not. I'm not the smartest person in the world. I'm surrounded by brilliant people. I'll go leverage them. I'll use them to get us to the end goal that you want us to be at. Um, and I think other people in the room said, "Oh my God," he said the three words. Oh, I don't know. So I think there's a lot
I
of it.
think
I'll,
it's
I'll go.
great. I think these days it's more I've seen that more lately than in the beginning of my career, I would say that this maybe it goes down to as well this there's a lot more we were talking earlier, Terry, about openness and like freedom within organizations and stuff, and I feel like people can be themselves more and being authentic and saying
Yes.
look, I don't know everything, so I know that I don't know this, and I'm just going to admit that, but I'm coming back to you. And I think that's well respected. Hank,
Well,
you mentioned the lunch line, and I wanted to pick up on something there.
yeah.
Um, Earlier we talked about your how to drive more engagement with people who are in the office, and obviously nowadays as you said, it's much less like that. There's a lot more hybrid or virtual work,
Yeah.
and I'm certainly experiencing that myself. And so for anyone who's working these days in that way, right, either teleworking or remote from their boss or whatever, um, what advice, would you give to someone who wants to be known in the organization, wants to be present, wants to be impactful, but doesn't have the opportunity to connect in person in the lunch line or in the office as much as we used to do? How can people ascend virtually, is my question.
Great
So
question.
I think, and that's a great question. I mean, and I wish I had something I could draw more from, direct experience, because I haven't had the opportunity necessarily to work remotely or hybrid. But um, I'm a big believer in mentors, um, and I have my whole life, and I would say do that even more importantly in the virtual world is make sure that other people that can champion you along the way, because mentors at times serve that purpose. Is they will get to know you. They will be able to assist you with your growth in that organization and personally, you know. So get them and leverage them. And then I was always a big believer of ask somebody for a coffee. Um, and what are they going to do? Tell me no? Really?
Hank,
I'm
it
going
is
to.
so funny that you should say this on this very day, because this morning, I was having a conversation with someone in our organization that I'm acting as a sponsor for them. And he and I have agreed it's kind of a blend of a sponsor and a mentor and a coach. So it's kind of floats around a few different services I provide him. But he was talking about, wanting to grow his career and going different places. And I said to him, have you, why don't you ask, like, that person over there works in that team. Why don't you ask them for some advice or feedback, or just the equivalent of what you said, like get a coffee together virtually. And it just blew my mind that this person, who is a very accomplished professional,
Yeah.
was like, oh, I don't know if I can do that cold. Like, that feels weird. And I'm looking at him like, they are not going to say no.
Yeah.
Like what you said, they're just not going to say
Gonna
no. So
say,
I think
yeah.
I would say to people, yeah, reach out. Of course,
Yeah.
use your mentors or
Yeah.
sponsors for
Yeah.
introductions, but no one says no if you call them and say, "Hey, can I have 15 minutes just to pick your brains about something, a virtual coffee?" Like, nobody says no.
Yeah.
You
And I
said
think sorry, Chad, I think a lot of people are being told, don't take the initiative. It's not going to be welcome. You're brown nosing, or that outreach is going to be viewed negatively. I'm just going to sit back and wait for someone to reach out to me. Well, about 3,000 years from now, and when the sun has crashed into Earth, that might actually happen, right?
Yeah.
But I think, you always have the right to say no if someone reaches out, or the timing's bad, or let's do it a little bit later. But I always thought it was a good thing if someone reached out to me, and anytime I did it, I tried to make it all about them. I really, truly want to get to know you. And it always worked. I mean, I don't know. I
Yeah.
think that's what I would tell you. And I'll go back to the lunch line. And it steals the stuff that Colin Powell did. So I can actually say I did it before Colin did. But when I got my plate, and I had, the military style dish with the pockets, and you got to pick something, and you exited the line, and you had this sea of people and desks and chairs and whatnot. Now, the average person would stare for a while and find that table in the back of people that they knew, and would wander over there and plop down with friends. I would go sit at a table of strangers every day. They could have a conversation. I plop down. Hey, nice to meet you guys. I'm Hank. I'm from building 179 across the way from Tabor Road. Who are you guys?
Yeah.
Okay. And they'd be like,
again,
oh my God, who is this nut? Okay, fine.
it's not normal. It's counterintuitive for people. I fully agree with you that the average person doesn't do this religiously. But
Mhm.
there was a study that I was again listening to this weekend that was saying they actually studied people like getting on the commute train or
Yeah.
whatever, and
Yeah.
said like, okay, are you going to talk to strangers on your commute or are you not? And before the study, people were like, heck no, I don't want to talk to
Yeah.
anybody. But so they had half the team talk to people and half the team not talk to people. And without doubt, the people who engaged with strangers on their commute that morning had a better feeling of the commute, had a better feeling about their day. Even though it doesn't feel like you want to do it at the time, it's always really good. And I think doing that in organizations to help you build that network and visibility, the equivalent of it, right? I
Yep.
think it's so important and so
Yep.
underestimated. Yeah.
It is.
I want to jump in here with a quick point. Somebody approaching with a cup half empty as my cup, as opposed to my cup is entirely full,
Yeah.
always leaves room for more to come into the equation. So that was such a critical thing that you said that I really, really
Well, thank
enjoyed
you.
and stood out.
So let me tell you another thing I did early on, which is very counterintuitive for engineers. I mean, maybe the Japanese, because they're used to working collectively, and they've been done that for years. But way back when, what I would do with my team is, if we had projects, to the extent that we could dissect them up into either discrete elements or things that were iterative, I would pair people together. And I didn't ask who wanted to be with who. I knew my people well enough that this was a strong person. This was a person who had a unique strength, and I wanted to see who could work together with each other. And I would move them around. And it put people in some people were very uncomfortable with it. And I said, well, you're going to have to get to love it, because at the end of the day, that team over there is waiting for you to finish your piece. So chop, chop, let's go. And I would hear back 5 or 6 years later, as people had moved around, someone would come back to me and say, you know what? That year that you put me and Steve together was probably the most enjoyable year of my life. I wound up, the two of us fed off of each other. We problem solved. Having kept everybody apart, or asked them to work on their little piece and maybe bring it together and hope that it worked. And then we started doing bigger groups. We started integrating other business units into the process, which wasn't particularly innovative, but I guess people started to adopt it as well, is to say, well, we're going to burp this out and think it's great. And then marketing and sales are like, well, we can't sell that. Well, okay, well, how about if we bring you back in to the process and work that way? But the team building, I thought, was my role in the leadership, was to ensure that we brought the teams together and that we held the teams together. We held them accountable. We nurtured them. I'd roll up my sleeves and come in at night and ask the team to come into a manufacturing facility. Let's understand what it is we're trying to get done here. So I think you also have to be somebody that, doesn't just take the elevator to the ninth floor. You don't forget that it stops along the way, and you were on those floors. Get off on those floors every now and then. Go see who's there. So I think a lot of it is, I don't know, I could talk all day, and I apologize, but for me, it's, the kind of servant leader in me, I guess that's kind of the cool word of the day, is it's get it so that it is you. It's you breathe it, you live it, you act it out. It's not something that you can put a cape on and become one.
Well, as I was listening to you, Hank, I was fascinated by the parallel of how you approached building teams with how you approached bringing joy. And it was the same. And, like your analogy at the beginning of like, when you start out, you just wanted to be funny. You were trying to bring your ego, if you want, to the things like,
Yeah.
I know what's funny. I'm going to bring that. And it was a very great and humbling experience to realize that actually your version of funny isn't what's needed. What we need to do is pull that from other people. And I think that's also what sounds like what you did in those team situations as well. You're not imposing your leadership. You're really bringing it out of other people. And I do think when leaders do that, they will get good results, they will get good outcomes, and they will get to grow in their own careers. So I think there's two sides to this career ascension thing, maybe to start to summarize and
Yeah, I agree.
start to take us home here. One is like, as an individual, what can I do to grow, and to take opportunities and to have the right mindset and, lean into new things and whatever. So as an individual, I think there's a lot we can do. But I think as you ascend, as you become a leader, then there's more skills that you have to develop to ascend further, which have to do with it's less about you and it's more about everybody
Mhm.
else. And I love the way you've sort of pulled that together.
No, I mean, you summarized that absolutely brilliantly. But yeah,
Terry, are we done? Are we anything else we need to cover in this
Oh man,
career rock climbing event that we've had this afternoon?
I love this, and something that you both said in your own unique way that I love, and something that Juan said in our last part of this segment was about becoming. You're becoming on the way, and so with Hank's analogy of the rock climbing wall, where there's bouldering involved, there's going sideways, there's going up. Maybe you got to go down a little bit before you can go up again to pick your path. And Zoe with the mountain and how all of that, the going around the mountain while you're going up the mountain. The thing about this that I really am taking away is you have to enjoy the journey. You have to have fun along the way. You have to bring other people with you. Um, and it's so much bigger than climbing a ladder in the best possible way, because the ladder is linear and boring, but what you're talking about is rich and full. You have a lot more ground under your feet when you're climbing a mountain as opposed to climbing a ladder.
yeah,
um it's
Yeah, and you develop different muscles too, because
yeah.
yeah,
if you're walking on rocky ground, your ankles get stronger, and if you're pulling yourself up on the scrambly bit, your arms get stronger. And I think that's why a breadth of experience rather than a singular straight line is going to make you a more balanced, rounded person, on top of all of the being an awesome, nice team building person that you need to be. But that breadth of experience is, as you get higher up, you know, it's not about the thing, it's about leadership.
Yeah.
It ceases to be about the thing halfway up the mountain. At that point, it's just about how good of a climber are you. It's not about kind of the topic anymore. And so yeah, I think this has been a really great episode, and great analogies. It seems like we love analogies, Terry. Um,
That's our jam. That's our jam.
Yeah.
I'll see
It's
you
good for the
That's
short content, right? It's good for the
Yeah.
short content. You
All
know,
right, take us home, Terry.
one thing I just have to ask, Hank, because I know a lot of people are going to be watching this, and there's so many amazing things that you guys have shared along the way. Um, pardon me. If you could give our listeners, let's say we have somebody who's looking at making a career change, or somebody who wants to pursue a new path, or somebody who's looking at just starting a new career for the first time, and they have all the ambition in the world to become, as high in that organization as they possibly can, because I was certainly one of those people.
Yeah.
What would be 3 things that you could tell them that they could do that would maybe not guarantee it that they would get to that point, but significantly, significantly increase their chances of ascending the mountain?
Well, first and foremost, I would make it known. I think as long as it's a secret, but it's going to be a secret. What do you want to do? What do you want to try? I mean, I'm an engineer by trade. I got to a point where I didn't want to do that anymore. I was mental from that, but I wanted to remain in the executive leadership. And how could I do that? What would that be? So I think first and foremost is let people know. And I'm not saying, listen, I hate my job. I'd rather be doing something differently and go nuclear like that. But it is, if you do think then ask to be exposed to that. Ask to be maybe given a special assignment. And I'll give you an example of somebody that I actually helped many, many years ago. And I would say, maybe don't pick one, pick a bunch, because I think sometimes if you feel like you're in a dead end, anywhere else is going to look good. Okay, really good. And I'm going to tell you, I know people that have done that, and you went from, being in the frying pan to being in the fire because you picked something diametrically opposed and it wound up being 1,000 times worse. So I think what you don't know is also something to be very cautious of. Solicit the mentors along the way. Have other people be your champion, be your advocate, be people that guide you through the path. It's not meant for you to figure out. You don't get awards for being bloodied at the end of this. Avoid the pitfalls, avoid the holes if you can. And I think those would be the ones that I would say. And I would say be prepared for it to be tough. It's not going to be easy. You've got to have the fortitude. Be prepared for it to be. You got to want it. If you just think this is a moonlighting and I'm going to try it, what the hell? Don't do it. Be deliberate about it. Be intentional about it, and I think you'll see the fruits of those labors. I remember walking through an R&D lab, and there was a young woman, PhD, who was working on some drug discovery. And I walked by, and there were these 3 pads out that were insane artwork. So on a lunch break or a break, the person was gifted with artwork. And I walked by and I noticed that she kind of quickly closed them up like I had, seen the inner beast. I said, "Those are amazing." I said, "What do you do with that?" She said, "Well, I've always had this creative side that I've never known what to do with." I said, "I'll tell you what, how would you like to join me on a couple of creative sessions with our marketing team?" Oh, I couldn't do that. So why not? So, I'm going to give you the date and time. All you have to do is show up, and I'll leave it at that. I said, but they're doing some whiteboarding on some new concepts for graphics and whatnot for some work. Really? Yeah. So I left. This is pre-email, right? So this was, here's the note where it's going to be. Here's where it's going to be, the date and time. And she didn't even ask my name. I didn't ask her name. And I remember showing up, sitting down, and honestly, I'd forgotten that I invited the woman. The woman shows up, and she spotted me, came over and sat down next to me. And we went around the room, and I said, oh, by the way, I'm delighted that we have a new person sitting here today. Would you kind of tell us who you are? And she did, indicated that she was from R&D, and everybody kind of like, what? I said, before you have anything to say, let's just go on. Let's bring up all the artwork. Let's take a look at where we're at. Let's discuss stuff. Let me tell you, a year later, she was a full-time director level person in the creative group. Okay. So this is somebody in advanced PhD but the love, the passion that person had was an entirely different thing. They had a job. They had perfect training. They were good at it. That's another part of leadership, is finding those people who are in that and enable that, as you indicated, Terry. How do you help people who sometimes can't articulate, I'm unhappy, I hate this job, I've got 2 degrees, it's driving me crazy. My only option is there another choice here? Do I leave? I like the company. I like the culture. I'm in the wrong spot. There isn't a mechanism that a company assesses that. Do they go around and do an assessment? Is everybody in the right job?
No, it's down to the manager, right?
It's down to the manager.
Yes.
And managers should do that, but and it's careful. How do you say, I don't think that person's in the right job? Well, be careful about making that assessment unless it's not grounded in something that, you truly understand that. It's not a very subjective assessment of that. But hopefully that answers it. I think again, a very verbose answer, but sorry.
That was don't you, man, please. That was absolutely incredible and very inspiring. I'm so glad you shared that. Zoe, do you have anything else before we let Captain Epic get off to his epic adventure?
Yeah, epic away.
Yeah, I wrote down my 3 thoughts, and not surprisingly, they were sort of similar in parts to Hank's, but I would summarize them as, sometimes I feel like when let's use the mountain analogy, we're kind of head down, kind of trumping away up the mountain. I think it's so crucial to just zoom out, right? And have a really wide view. And I think that ties to what Hank was saying about, what do you want to try? Like, open your eyes wider than you think to see what's available. So that would be one. I think second, and you also mentioned this, Hank, is ask for help. Like, we talked about it already. Like, this is not a solo climb. And you most of the time are not going to get turned down if you ask for some help. Now, of course, if you do, well, just ask someone else. But I think it's really important to ask for help. And then I think the last one, which we touched on a little bit, and I think it's really key to someone's internal reputation, is to be the kind of person that other people want to work with. Like, don't be an
Yeah.
asshole. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
no, that's right. Yeah.
that's simple, right? And then people want to work with you, and along with all the other things we've talked about in terms of your mindset and leaning in, and people will remember you and look kindly on you, and I think that's worth a lot.
Yeah. And if I could add one other one, because when you brought up the A word, I'm like, we're going to go into the second hour of this because we just cracked I'm going to pull out a beer over here and get started. But I think the one thing that I was adamant about in my time was to make sure that the credit was given where it belonged. Particularly in engineering, where we were stumbling across things, we were patenting certain things, we were creating some very, very innovative things and doing crazy stuff. We were evolving by being revolutionary. And when it came time to present what we were doing, it was very easy for people to get up and say, let me tell you what it is that I've made happen in my team. And I had bosses like that. Let me tell you the great stuff that I'm doing on behalf of this. And they would rattle off the 6 things. Meanwhile, everybody in the room, who are the ones that were the authors of it, the architects of it, the discovery people, I would say, listen, I'm going to let everybody in this room who's here tell you about the great things that they're doing. And that, again, some people don't like to talk in public, but I'm sorry, but you're actually working on something really cool right now. And I want you to tell the world about it. I want you to tell the people in this room about it. Okay. And it seemed like I was one of the first people to ever do that. And people said, thank you for not taking the spotlight. Thank you for being somebody that let it shine on somebody else. And I'll give you a classic example, Zoe. Now that you've got me yapping, I won't stop. When I worked for Tetley, um, we came up and we invented and we patented the round tea bag. Okay. And we did it for a variety of reasons. And all the people in the business and the 2 people that were designing it at the time. And I added another dimension, which we got a patent for, and that was a violation of everything according to life. But people said it has to have a string and a tag. How are we going to get the damn bag out of the cup? And I said, yeah, but what you're fundamentally failing to understand is the reason why it's round and why the design came about is it floats at the top of the cup in the center of the cup. The hottest spot in a cup of tea being brewed is at the top of the water in the middle of the cup. Heat is rising, and you can steep a richer, bolder cup of tea with a round tea bag. The square tea bag with a string and tag sinks, and people bob it up and down ceremonially. Why? They got to get it in and out of the hot water, right? So it got patented on all of that. It flew through the patent process because it worked. It did. It produced the amount of solids in the cup of tea was more than anybody else's, hands down. And I finally got the 2 people who decided that talk about it. Tell them about the genesis of the idea. How the hell do you arrive at taking everything off a bag that's been on it for 100 years and you take it off? And they did. And then we went down the perversion path. And I said, well, you've got a lot of American drinkers that drink tea with sugar. And whether it's, sugar in first, milk in last, whatever your ritual is. I said, what if we managed to impregnate the filter paper with sugar? A teaspoon of sugar impregnated in the filter paper. So when you put that bag in the water, it brewed the tea and infused a teaspoon of sugar into the cup. It's patented, by the way. It never saw the light of day because someone said half the fun with adding sugar is adding the sugar. Okay, putting the lump in or the cube in or however you dispense sugar. So that was the evolution of something that said, my comment early on, and I really went down the rabbit hole deep on this one, was letting the people that are being innovative, that are leading and are demonstrating capability, capacity, ingenuity, being innovative, speak for themselves, and let them be people that get exposed, because that's going to allow them to migrate to other opportunities. Can they excel somewhere else? Absolutely. Do they know where that's going to be? Probably not. As a leader, would you give them a secondment in another group for a year to see what happens? Absolutely. So I think, that was another thing that I would have added to my list was it's all too easy for people to go unnoticed, particularly in a day and age where you're working from home remotely. It's not going to be captured and it may not be highlighted in the way that it should be. So somebody has to make that happen.
My gosh, what a discussion. I feel like this was packed with knowledge. This was packed with experience, laughs. Man, I know I had an absolutely amazing time. For everybody that's listening right now, we have 2 great leaders, 2 great executives in America with us, Balance and Brilliance. Thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you guys for sharing all of this amazing experience, Hank. I absolutely loved listening to you. I learned so much from you guys.
Thank you.
And for anybody who's watching this, for anybody who's listening, if there's anything that you want to comment on, or if you had a takeaway from this episode that's going to help you, or if you have something to share that can add to this conversation, please go down below, leave a like and a comment. If you want to support this channel and see more amazing content like this, make sure you give us a subscribe. We're going to be doing these videos all the time. I want to pass it over to my wonderful co-host, Zoe, if she has anything to add before we let this amazing individual go here.
No, just thank you very much, Hank, for your exemplary leadership and sharing that with us here today. And I'm sure people learned a lot about how to be a great manager and also how to leverage great managers, and to speak up for yourself in lots of different ways, even if your manager's not like Hank. Encouraging that, but speaking up, getting noticed, getting out there is how you get ahead. And yeah, I think I would leave it there. Terry, thank you so much for your participation today too.
Always. And we will catch everybody on the next one. We're going to make sure that we leave Hank's info here. Definitely go check out his socials. Make sure that, if you're able to connect with him, absolutely incredible person. You do posting all the time. So, make sure that you're following what Hank's doing, because it is always epic. That is for sure. And with that, we will catch you on the next one. Thanks for tuning in to Balance and Brilliance.
Everybody.
In this, our second episode in the Crafting a Career series, we talked to Hank Marshall, a seasoned and empathetic leader, passionate about innovation and international business. The framing of the episode was about climbing the corporate ladder, but Hank and I both have a different analogy for ascending in organizations. Hank's is a climbing wall with many ways to the top. Mine a mountain that you make your way around, gathering a broad base of experience. Whatever the climb, we agree that it's not linear nor symmetrical, and you really need to understand your destination before you get there. Hank raised a really amazing point that our career journeys are not solo climbs. They are not about you. They are other people helping you, and you are helping other people on the way. Whether you are lifting people up or letting them fly for their own growth, great managers support their employees to grow, and this is critical, as you just never know what role they may have in your career in the future. On this point, both Terry and Hank had great examples of the kindness shown by a manager paying dividends later when circumstances were different. I introduced some insights from the book Impact Players by Liz Wiseman, which describes the characteristics and mindset of people who do well. Hank picked up on the need for a mindset based on evolution through revolution, where a focus on constantly challenging the status quo, with nothing sacred that can't be challenged in the pursuit of excellence. This is how Hank earned his moniker of Captain Epic that you will see in his LinkedIn profile if you check him out. If you're going to be doing something, he says, make it epic. Hank told us a story of an early mission in his career when he was tasked with being a minister of fun. I think his learnings from that time have positively impacted his management style and taught him to listen deeply to his people, and as they put it, to be interested versus interesting. This ties into the lesson we heard from Juan Fernandez in an earlier episode of being constantly curious. If you focus on being interested and showing that interest, leaders will think of you when opportunities become available. Hank told us of a memorable occasion of having to admit that he did not have the answer to something, and was brave enough to say, "I don't know," and committed to finding it out quickly. We all agree that this will be looked on kindly, even if it might feel uncomfortable at times to admit. Leaders have self-awareness, and being honest about what you don't know is important, because there will always be something. As we approach the end of the discussion, Hank covered his top 3 tips for people wishing to ascend in the corporate world. He replied first with something that I've also taken from my own career learnings. If you want to ascend in the organization, make it known. Ask for that special assignment. Waiting for someone to approach you, you could be waiting a while, and others might seize the opportunity. Second, he encouraged people to solicit mentors on the way. It can help you to avoid the pitfalls and traps that others may have seen or experienced on their journey. Finally, he said, be prepared for it to be tough. Fortitude and persistence is important, and you need to really want it. Be deliberate and intentional about what you are pursuing. This also ties back to our first episode on crafting a career, where I talked about being intentional, based on the roles that you know will suit your personal vision. Well, that wraps this one up. But if you have not checked out the first episode in this series, it's a strong one with some great career motivation lessons from a former pro athlete turned coach. I hope you have a great day. Whatever you are seeking in your career at this time, make it known. And in honor of Hank, make it epic. Have a great day.